All that we experienced this weekend, the spectacle, the organization, the competition, the traditions, all this harkened back to one man, a man with remarkable talent, profound intellect, and above all, vision. Dr. Wiltz Wagner started motorcycling himself in his 20s, and from the very start it became clear that Wiltz was destined to put an important imprint on the sport of observed trials. One might imagine the motorcycle would simply be a form of relief from the pressures of his profession, his day job, as physician in medical and clinical research, something that I can certainly relate to. But as the decades ahead would prove, Wiltz would not be simply an enthusiast or a competitor. His drive to challenge, to improve upon, to grow and celebrate our sport became his mission. His drive would shape motorcycle trials indelibly. And the end of his influence on our sport is nowhere in sight. Historically, early U.S. trials events were one-off events put on by individual organizations without the benefit of any real club or formal network. At that time, Wiltz was competing in such events in the Colorado area, but he envisioned a more organized approach to competition. So he helped organize the Rocky Mountain Trials Association. Wiltz takes pride in the fact that this occurred without a single vote. And to this day, the organization operates without any voting. Does this sound familiar to anybody that's ever been to a North American Trials Council meeting? Yet, in his quiet genius, Wiltz purposely developed a club where experimentation was welcome. The spirit of debate and creativity lives on in NATC governance to this very day. Soon after RMTA was established in 1973, Wiltz organized a meeting of trials organizers, including the famed Mick Andrews, and the initial concept of a North American Trials Council was formed. The goal was to create a quality American Championship Series and prepare riders for international competition. He insisted that the council be linked to the American Motorcycle Association, and thus linked to world competition and the FIM. A fact that he doesn't want us to know is that during the early and financially lean years of the council, Wiltz personally underwrote the organization. In recognition of his contribution to the sport, the council named the American rounds of the World Championship Series the Wagner Cup. This cup made its first appearance on this exact site 25 years ago, and it sits here today. Many, in fact most of his motorcycle friends, have no idea what a giant Wiltz Wagner is in the medical and scientific community. If I were to review his resume and list his medical accomplishments and contributions to modern medicine, we would be here all night. I feel absolutely obligated, however, both as an admirer and as a colleague, to touch upon this. Dr. Wagner is internationally recognized for his extensive medical research on the lung, sickle cell disease, liver disease, high-altitude physiology, among many others. He was a pioneer in the identification of and study of athletic amenorrhea. He has conducted research all over the world. Wiltz has held faculty positions with the University of Indiana. He is a professor of pharmacology at the University of South Alabama. Dr. Wagner is a V.K. Stotling Professor of Anesthesiology and Biophysics at the Indiana University School of Medicine. He is at once brilliant and a common man, both a sophisticated iconoclast and a patient listener, always with a vision of what the best might look like and what tomorrow might bring. Those who know Wiltz will agree that it is impossible to have a dialogue with Wiltz Wagner without being changed, have been made better by the conversation, and for having been in the presence of this great man. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. Wiltz Wagner.
I'm going to pay for that.
Yeah, you are.
Dr. Brennan, I appreciate that preposterous introduction. Scraping around for little flakes of nothing. And now I look at these pictures and remember the trips of the 70s. You can imagine with James Dean and the band. There was much success. And then I see the picture of me, which I carefully photoshopped out the cigarette that was in my hand. And now that it's enlarged, I see I missed erasing the butt of the cigarette. It's a little white.
This is why he couldn't go first.
So let me start with that event, which was put on by the AMA. That was a previous administration that few people know about. They were incredibly ambitious to the point where they were forming an AMA office in Geneva to compete with the FIM, which was not well received. The AMA was so far in the back of the doghouse that ever coming out seemed impossible. They got in trouble financially and they looked to trials to bail them out. All of us in this room know that that is an absurd idea. And they put on this event in Saddleback Park in Southern California. It rained. It was mud. The checkers were LAPD police officers who had no idea what the hell they were doing. And the Europeans had discussions with them in every section and every ride. The time limit was wrong and only 10 people finished. All the rest of us were DNFs. This basically was a catastrophe, and relationships between the AMA and the FIM not only suffered, but were severed. Following that event, Mick Andrews agreed to join us in the first meeting of the North American Trials Council. At that time, there was chaos. We knew that there were various trials clubs around the country, but no one had ever traveled. I mean, no one had ever traveled. So the first job that I did was to assemble a list of the clubs. That was easy for most clubs, but there was some that resisted it. Those lists were smuggled out. And one of them, I telephoned to find out if I could get the list, and I heard something that sounded like a bar fight in the background. And I asked what was going on, and they said, "We're having a vote on whether to close the window." Which is part of the philosophy of why we don't have any votes in the council. Well, we had a successful first season, and as you've heard, the event came here, and David Russell and Bill Matheson and all the rest put on a superb event. Meanwhile, there was a change in the leadership at the AMA. The trial czar and others were kicked out, and Ed Youngblood took over. Ed has been a friend of trials since the beginning, and he helped us organize the second meeting in Ohio. The result of that, as you've heard, was the 1975 event here. Those meetings have gone on now for 40 years. They're not always no-vote fun times. There have been some attempts at coup d'etat that were quite serious. And I found that when the bullets fly and I'm in a foxhole, there are two people I want in that hole with me. These two guys, Bill Matheson and David Russell. There were no successful coup d'etats. Well, we had the event here in 1975. It was approved by the AMA. It was approved by the FIM. Ed Youngblood himself attended. At the end of the event, he was told by champions like McAndrews and Malcolm Rathmo that it was the best event in the year. That event put the America trials on the map in the world. It reestablished for the first time, trials did, relationships with the FIM, and within 5 years, Ed Youngblood was vice president of the FIM. All of this flows from one thing, the great success of the 1975 event that these two men put on. We owe them everything. Thank you.